Good evening. This week's Parsha is Parshas Vayishlach, and we know that Yaakov Avinu went back for Pachim Ketanim. He had forgotten some of his little jars, and he went back to get them. And the Meforshim ask, why is it when he went back to pick those items up, did the Sarah Shel Esav, the archangel of Esav, attack him? Why did he choose that setting to attack him? He was waiting the whole time to attack him, and now he did it. And they answer and say, because Yaakov Avinu was the epitome of ruchnius in this world. He wanted the Bechor, he wanted the brachos, and it was all for the ruchnius, for the spirituality of the items. But now that he was going back for the Pachim Ketanim, the Satan thought that he was going into the world of Gashmias, because he was going back. I mean, even though the Gemara says that he went back because, and from this they learn that that the money of tzaddikim is more chaviv, more important to them than their own guf, which is in and of itself is a startling statement. But if you analyze that the reason that he gave such chashivas, some Meforshim say, because every minute that somebody has to earn a physical item, that means he has to work for the food that he has in his house, he has to work for the electricity, whatever he has to work for it. So he's taking time of life for his possession. And that's the reason that Yaakov Avinu went back. He went back to get those Pachim Ketanim because he had spent time in acquiring them, not because he was interested more in the Gashmias, in the physicality of this world, than of the Ruchnias. Now we know that Hanukkah is in another few weeks, and that one of the Meforshim discussed that Yaakov Avinu went back to get these little jugs because one of those jars had in it the oil that they found at the time of Hanukkah in the Bais Hamikdash to be able to rekindle. And it was with his chasima, because Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov all had a din of a kohen gadol. That's how they were able to sleep in the Makom HaMikdash and to walk there and everything that they did. So Yaakov Avinu knew that Klal Yisrael 1,700 years later would need the oil to be able to have the Ness of Hanukkah. So that was the reason why he went back for these Pachim Ketanim. Now, when the Sar Shel Esav attacked him, the Sar Shel Esav said to him, Shalcheni, let me go. They were fighting. And he was holding on to him. And he said to Yaakov Avinu, please let me go. Ki Allah hashachar, because it is my turn, as the Chazal say, and in the Medrash, that the Malach has one time in its existence the opportunity to say Kedusha. Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzavokos, Melocho, Lord's Kavodo, and Baruch Kavod Hashem Mimkomo. And after being created 2,100 years before, all the Malachim have only one opportunity to join in with Klal Yisrael and to say Kedusha, and that's why we say V'kora ze el ze v'yamar, corresponding from the Malachim down to the people of this world. The obvious difference is that a Malach has only one opportunity, once in his existence, to say Kedusha. Every time we say Kedusha, it's a different Malach, it's different Malachim. Malachim hamone mala im amcha Yisrael kavutze matar. But a Yid has the golden opportunity that each and every time he wants to say Kedusha, Shachris, or Mincha, or even multiple times, if someone's in a shul, that they have a few minyanim, and he happens to be by those minyanim when they're saying Kedusha, he has the right to seize the opportunity and to say Kedusha once again. So the Malach, the Satan who was fighting, and he is a Malach for bad, but he's a Malach, his opportunity and chance came, and he pleaded with Yaakov Avinu, let me go, it's my turn, and if I don't go up and say Kedusha, I've lost my chance. So Yaakov Avinu first asked him, Ma shemecha, what is your name? And the Malach answered him and said, Lama za tishal l'shmi, why are you asking me my name? Now, it wasn't that the Mefarshim explained, it wasn't that the Malach was being difficult and that he didn't want to answer the question. But he was answering the question because Yaakov Avinu wanted to know his mitzias and the upmake and the ingredients of what he represented. And he answered and said, I am Satan, there's nothing to me. My mission is only to drag people away from their mission in life of Torah, of Avodah, of Gemilas Chasodim. I am there to effectively prevent them and convince them not to do it. And my substance is like air in a balloon. There's nothing there. There's nothing that we could justify and show that our existence has substance. And that's why he asked him, what are you asking my name? Because a name connotes mitzias, ingredients, characteristics. Like Adam Arishon, when he named everyone, he saw with Ruach HaKodesh their essence. And he was able to call every animal by its name and what its inner essence was. And that's why the Gemara makes such a big deal that when a person has a Hebrew name, Lashon Kodesh, you're not allowed to give him a nickname. Like you see in some places, you'll hear instead of them calling the person Moshe or Yaakov or Chaim or Shloima, they're calling him Cookie or some sort of wild. And the Gemara goes so far to say that Ein lo chelek l'olam haba, you nickname someone and you call him by the nickname, he is taken away from olam haba. Why? Why so severe? Because when you call a person a name that he was named, you are connecting with his essence. And when you call him some nickname, you are denying his essence. And his essence is nitzchias, olam haba. And that's why if he uses a nickname, there is no, the Gemara says, ein lo chelek li olam haba. And there are 5 levels, our Chazal tell us, of the world and its metzias. We have stones, which is domim, which does not talk, which does not grow, which does not move. Then we have tzomeach, which is vegetation, tomatoes. They're not human. They're not even the level of an animal, but they are alive, so to speak, that they grow and they become ripe and that they are eaten. And then we have domem chaya, tzomeach, and then chaya, which is like an animal that is alive, it can move, it can talk amongst itself, its own language. And then you have a medaber, let's say goyim, that they're human, and that they are speaking and conversing and communicating. And then you have Yisrael, which is put into a separate category, elevated above all those other 4 things that comprise the world. Now, a medaber, because it's a yid, he's not only a human, but he's an elevated human with a neshama, and with all the ramifications and all the items that encompass and that he possesses here in this world. Now, in our parsha, it says that when Rachel Imenu was nifter, Yaakov Avinu put a matzeva. And it's the first mention of matzeva in the Torah. Why do we put up a matzeva, which is a stone? And it carries such chashivas, the Mekubalim say, that when a person is nifter and he is buried, so when the family is saying Kaddish for him and giving tzedakah for him and learning Mishnayos for him, it envelops the neshama and it uplifts it from any attack of the averos that he did during his lifetime. But the shleimus, say the Mekubalim, of his eternal resting, the shleimus of menucha to the nifter is when they put up a matzeva. And that is the reason by Vishnitz, by Lubavitch, by Satmar, that as soon as they finish the Shiva, within a day, they are back at the kever and the matzeva is put up. They have the matzeva made during the Shiva. So it should be available because of this inyan al pi Kabbalah that the shleimus of the menucha, the resting of that nifter, takes place in totality when you put up the matzeva. Now there are others who have a minhag to first put up the matzeva after 30 days, or some even do it after a year. But the Mekubalim are very against it, and most of the time you find it in the groups that are not into Kabbalah. Lehalacha, you could do it at the end of the year, so they follow that. But if you see what the Mekubalim have to say about the people who wait and deny the nifter, the eternal peacefulness, the shlemus of menucha, they wouldn't do that. And that's why so many Hasidim immediately put up the matzeva. And the first matzeva mentioned is by Kever Rochel, that Yaakov Avinu in our parsha, when she was nifter, after she gave birth to Binyamin, talk about this matzeva. And that's why a matzeva has, even though it can't talk, it doesn't move, it doesn't grow any stone, but it can bring out in its existence that simple stone on a kever, or stones when there's a mission which is higher, like it says last week's parsha, that when Yaakov Avinu got to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Har Moriah, when he got there after he finished learning the years in Shem Va'aver, and he came there, and that the stones were fighting who should be the pillow for Yaakov Avinu. And Rashi brings it, that they said, Alai Yaniach HaTzadik. I want that the Tzaddik Yaakov should rest on me and sleep on me, using me as a pillow. And it says that they all gathered together and became one. But what would the difference really be? But the answer is there's a big difference. Because even though it's innate and it doesn't talk and it doesn't move and it doesn't grow, but in its essence being a created substance, an item, it has inherent in it the ability to be able to bring out not only for living, but those who are nifter, to bring out, when we put the matzev out, the shlemus of that menucha. Now, the beginning of the parsha says that there were, Yaakov sent Malachim, Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim el Esav, el Ochev el Esav. And Rashi says, in other words, the simple translation means he sent messengers. But Rashi comes and tells us that those weren't human messengers, they were Malachim Mamish. They were really angels from heaven. And Meforshim ask, what right did Yaakov Avinu have to use a holy army to fight Esav? And Esav had, the pasuk says, 400 people with him. And the Mekubalim explain that when Avram Avinu wanted to bury Sarah, and he had this debate with Ephron about the money, at the end of the story, it was 400, Arba Meo Shekel Kesef, and it corresponded to these 400. Why did Esav come with 400 and not 300, not 600? Why 400? Because there are kitos of angels on the bad side of the fence and on the good side. When Avram Avinu bought Ma'oras HaMachpelah, and it became a resting place, not only for Adam and Chava, who were already buried there, but it became a resting place for Avram and Sarah and Yitzchak and Rivka and Yaakov and Leah, it became a resting place because he was able to be Makadesh. You see, if someone takes up, in any city, wants to make a Beis HaChayim, they have in their city the need, they have Yidden people pass away, and they want to convert from a shetach, from a piece of land, into a cemetery. They are required to fast. They have to take a minyan, and they have to, and they fast the entire day, and they walk around the property that's going to become a cemetery, and they're mekadesh it. That means it has to be ready for Tchias HaMesim, that the dead who are buried in the cemetery have the ability to stand up and attach themselves to Tchias HaMesim, to becoming alive once again and going to Eretz Yisrael. Now, it says that those who may have been Rishoyim and they were busy a whole lifetime, and we can't judge anyone because many grew up, they didn't know better, they didn't learn, they were in a non-from community, so we can't point the finger and say this one or that one. But in Shemayim, they know the difference, who could be blamed and who is not blamed. So to be able to stand up at time of Tchias HaMesim, they had to be buried in a Makom Kadosh, which they're Mekadesh to Karka. By their fasting and by going then to the mikveh, they all must go to the mikveh, and then they walk around the property saying all sorts of tikkunim and tillim and all sorts of things, that then you can bury a Jewish nifter, and it becomes his resting place. Now, Avram Avinu knew that it wasn't just a debate with Ephron how much money, but it was the essence of Tumah, and it was the bittul of the 400 negative angels, that when he paid the 400 shekel kesef, it became a conduit, and it became a tzinor to be able to effectively be mevatel, and it became an unbelievable Makom Kadosh. And then it was Roy for the Kvura. Likewise, when Esav came, it said, Va'arba meos ish imo, that there were 400. Why 400? Because he was bringing those evil forces to be able to really combat Yaakov Avinu and to deny him of life. He wanted first to kill him. But we find that Yaakov Avinu, when he spoke to his wives and children about the strategy of how they should encounter Esav, it says, V'revach tosimu bein eder la eder, that he said, and there should be a space, a retrieve between each grouping. And Rashi brings the Chazal because he wanted that Esav should look at the people. When you have, let's say, a group of Yidden, group of people, and you don't stand together, but you stand a little dispersed, it looks like a bigger group. So it would represent a little more strength. But the Balaturim says that the only other place in Kol HaTorah Kula, in the Chav Daled Kisvei Kodesh, that you find the word revach, resh vov, ches, is by Esther. Because Mordechai, when she said, he hasn't called me, I could get killed. So Mordechai said, listen, you go ahead, it's a holy mission. Because if you don't do it, Revach v'hatzolo yamod la Yehudim mimokom acher va'at uvesavich tovedu. That if you don't do it, don't worry, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to forsake Klal Yisrael. He will give another alternative, he'll give another option for them to be saved, and then you will be lost. You lost your mission, that you were put into the position of where you are, and that you could have been saved, and the one who motivated and brought about the saving of the entire Klal Yisrael. So the Balaturim says that there's only over here, when he said Revach Tosimu, that you should put a space between yourselves to make that presentation. And the other place is by Mordechai and Esther. Now, Mordechai learned, and this is what the Balaturim says, that he learned from Yaakov Avinu, and that's why he used the word Revach also, because it was a message from Yaakov Avinu how to confront Goyim. And the Ramban Taka says that if anyone has to go on a mission, let's say to meet a king or to meet a president or to meet a senator, and it's a Klal Yisrael issue, he should say over this parsha of Vayishlach, not the whole Sedra, just the first piece that up until Sheni, and say it with lots of kavana, because in his mission and meeting with the person who probably is not Jewish, the secrets of these words and these psukim will help him be effective in his mission of what he wants to do and what he wants to accomplish. And what was the lesson of Yaakov Avinu? That when you have confrontation, he set out, as Rashi says, was first tefillah, you daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, l'doron, and then gifts, and then milchama. Yidden were taught by Yaakov Avinu, says the Balaturim, that when you confront trouble, you don't start off with fighting. Yidden never won wars by fighting. That means when Avram Avinu beat the kings, it wasn't a regular fight. He picked up sand and he threw it at them. They became, the Medrash says, spears. And that's how he won the war. So that wasn't a regular fight here in Olam Hazeh between two people or two armies. But the first thing we have to do is we have to succeed with heavy tefillah, and then if that still needs effectiveness, to then come, sometimes you had to bribe army officials, you sometimes had to lie, you sometimes had to do all sorts of things to chanfa, to praise, to do things peacefully, and not start with war. That's how Yidden always succeeded, and that's what the Baal HaTurim says, that Mordechai learned from Yaakov Avinu that there was tefillah, and they went Lech Kenosis Kol HaYehudim to fast and to daven and to cry out like Mordechai did. And it says that Mordechai saw with his nevuah, and he was at that level, he was part of the Anshe Knesset Gedolah. The Gemara even says that he was number one in the line, but after this whole story of Purim, he had to move down to the 5th seat because he lost, because he wasn't learning during that time. He now had to sit in the 5th seat, which is unbelievable because he was busy saving Klal Yisrael. He wasn't sitting home and drinking tea or relaxing on a hammock. Excuse me. But he was fasting Vayizak Tza'aka Gedola, that he was crying and screaming. But it says that he knew that not one Yid would be ever killed. As a matter of fact, there was only one Yid that Haman succeeded in killing, and that was Daniel. Daniel, our famous Navi, was killed by Haman. But not another Yid was touched by him or affected by this whole story. So Mordechai learned up that the way to do it is to come and to beg and to speak nicely, but to gather Klal Yisrael to fight off the onslaught was not the way to do it, even if he came with the 400 men and started the fighting. Now, when Esav came close, the pasuk says, "Vayisa Esav es einav." He picked up his eyes. He looked at Yaakov. Vayaris hanoshim ves hayalodim. He saw the wives, the 4 wives, and he saw all the children. And Vayomer, he said, Mi eilaloch. You, Yaakov, said you wanted the Bechor and you wanted the brachos for all the ruchnius, the spirituality that it encompassed. And look at all the Gashmias. How many wives do you have and how many children? But you see, he asked that question, and Yaakov answered, Vayomar, Hayelodim asher chonan elokim esavdecha. That you think this is all Gashmias and we were just participating in marriages for the desire. He asked him about the women. But and Vayomer mi eilaloch, where does it come to you if you were claiming the mantle and umbrella of pure spirituality? Vayomar, he answered him, didn't mention the women, that the whole purpose of being married was the nitzchias of Klal Yisrael. And that's the reason that we have and we engage in mishpachos and the nitzchias of Klal Yisrael. Vayomar, he answered him, Hayelodim asher chonan elokim esavdecha. It's not the wives like you think. That's what you see, such a encampment of so many in the family, because that's the purpose and tachlis and tafkid for Yiddish mishpachos and for marriage by Yidden. And that was the reason, because the Mefarshim asked, what right did Yaakov Avinu have to summon the angels? I mean, angels are complete holiness. Who gave him the right? Malachim, Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim El Esav Achiv Arza Seir Sedei Edom. And he summoned the angels to come and to take care. But the answer is because he wasn't doing it for himself. He was doing it for the nitzchias of Klal Yisrael. This confrontation was confrontation. Will Yaakov Avinu succeed with the Yud Beis Shiftei Kor and all the generations till the Geula Shlema or not? And for that, he felt he had the right to be able to bring down all of these angels. And that's why he used them for that purpose. Now, in our Sedra, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, don't call yourself Yaakov, call yourself Yisrael, ki sarisa im Elokim va'anoshim va'tuchal, and you were victorious. Rashi says when he's referring to Elokim, it meant with Esav and all of the angels that he summoned to help him. And when he said Anoshim, he meant Lavan and Esav. And when it said Elokim, he was talking about with the angel that he was fighting, V'sar shel Esav, and Anoshim was Lavan and Esav. So the Meforshim ask a question. Vatuchal means, and you were victorious. And that's why you got the name Yisrael, like it's the word from, ki sarisa im Elokim vatuchal, because you were victorious. Now, if you want to say he was victorious, let's say by Lavan, he had a hard time, but he was victorious. And Lavan Garti Voicharata, that he kept the Taryag mitzvahs, he didn't lose one level or one iota of the distinction of being so kadosh and keeping carefully every mitzvah and every avodah. But to say that he fought with the angel and he was victorious, he came out limping, he had to concede to be able to win the thing, and for the nitzchias of Klal Yisrael, we would be fighting Goyim and not winning. So what do you mean we were victorious? So the Soloveitchiks, one of them, said that a Yid learns from that story, from that Rashi, that winning does not mean beating up the other person to a pulp, but it means succeeding in gaining and commanding the force of what you wanted to accomplish. That's called victory. Yes, Yaakov bowed down. Look how he bowed down to Esav. And the Zohar Kodesh asked, how could Yaakov Avinu have bowed down to the pillar of Tumah and what Esav was at that point? And the Zohar Kodesh says that the Shechina, it says in Pasuk that he bowed down 7 times, that every time he bowed down, the Shechina presented itself in front of Yaakov. So when he was bowing, he didn't see he was bowing to Esav. He was bowing to the Shechina. And then when he stood up and bowed again, he he was bowing down to the Shekhinah. But he had to come, and look how he was about, it says, Vayira Yaakov, Yaakov was afraid, Vayetzer lo. And Rashi says, what's this Lashon Vayira? Because he was afraid that he would be killed in this confrontation with Esav. Vayetzer lo, that maybe Shema Yahareg Esacher, maybe he's going to have to kill others. Now the question really is that if somebody comes to kill you, the Gemara says, and it's the halacha, hashkem lahorgo. That means if you know somebody is coming to you with a gun to shoot you, you can do anything to preempt him and kill him. Because he wants to kill you. A rodef and a nirdaf. And you're allowed, al pi halacha, you're not just allowed, you're supposed to try to survive, and you can kill him first if that's what survival will need. So the Meforshim explain, Yaakov Avinu knew the halacha, that if he could kill Esav and his people, he could do it. But he was afraid that the nature of a person is, if he kills someone, we're not killers, Klal Yisrael. We are a people of Rachmanis, and that's why the pasuk by an Ira Nidacha says that if a city went and convinced the city that they should all become oivdei avodah zarah, it's called an Ira Nidachas, and you go and you kill out the entire city, the men, the women, and the children. The Gemara says that there's a strong opinion that it never happened, an Ira Nidachas. But the fact is that if you go and kill out a city, you become a killer. The metzias of the midas and the characteristics of a yid, that he's a rachaman, and that he exudes that pity, and he exudes rachmanis, mercy. But if you kill people like that, you're not such a merciful person anymore. So that's why the Torah promises you that if you go and you kill out an Ira Nidachas, you do not become a killer. You will maintain and have inherently in you all of the love and pity and mercy for another yid. That's why I don't want to say lahavdil, because she was Jewish. Golda Meir, she once publicly said, the fact that you killed some of our boys in the war, that's war, and I can forgive you. But I cannot forgive you for making out of our Jewish boys killers. That they killed to survive, which was mutter 1,000%, it was milchemes mitzvah. But she felt that ingrained in their DNA now was a changing facet in them to be able to kill, because they went and killed that month 10 Arabs. So now they became killers. And she said, I could never forgive them for that. And that is the point of this Dvar Torah. That when the pasuk says Vayetzer, Yaakov Avinu was worried, are we going to become killers? if we have to defend, yeah, I know we're allowed to, and I know we should do it. Not just allowed, but we can do it. But do we change the actual fiber of the essence of our being as Yidden? That's the Vayetzer. The Mepharshim say it. That's why he was afraid. Now, the pasuk tells us that when Yaakov met Esav, he brought him a gift and it was effective. He didn't try to kill him anymore, even though it says that he did want to kill him, but he didn't succeed in anything. And he begged him to take the gift. And the Ramban and others say that when you go to a goy and you give him a gift, that has a resounding effect in the psyche of the goy. And if the goy says, no, I don't want it, I don't need it, you have to see to it that he takes it once you've offered. Because once you've offered, it already is working on him the fact that he's getting something free. And if you don't end up giving it to him because he protests or he says he doesn't want it or he doesn't need it, then you're in big trouble, because it's going to work against you. So when Yaakov Avinu gave the gift, and Esav answered him and said, my dear brother, I have much. I don't need it. But Yaakov answered him and said, Yeshli kol, not rov. I have everything, because a Yid is always content with what he has. And that's the reason why when we say Ezeu Osher, who is a rich person? Someone who's Sameach B'chelko. Because you can't achieve true simcha if you feel that you're lacking. And a Yid will always be able to supersede, if he works on himself, that what he has, he's happy. And that he is able to function as a true Oved Hashem, learning and chesed and all that, because he is not seeking for himself more than HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given him, and that Baruch Hashem, he lives in a house, whether he's renting or whether he's buying, and the food and the clothing and the car, and he has an inner glow of happiness. And that's what Yaakov answered him, Yeshli kol, that I feel I have everything. I'm not dreaming about, well, on my block every car is newer than my car, or every kitchen is fancier than mine. But to be able to exude that glow of happiness and to be able to be truly with that feeling of content. But Esav, it's never enough. Someone that has 1 million, he wants the 5. And if he has the 5 million, he wants the 10. That's the Yesh Li Rov. Now we find in this parsha that Dinah was violated by Shechem ben Hamor. And in the violation, Dinah became pregnant, she expected, and she had a baby daughter, which the Medrash says she brought home the baby daughter to her father's household, and he didn't want her in the household. He put a kameya around her neck and said, Zu osnas bas Dina bas Yaakov. And when she ended up in Mitzrayim, in the house of Potiphar, Yosef saw the kameh and realized it was his niece, his sister's daughter, and he married her. And with her, he had Manasseh and Ephraim. Now, when the brothers found out that their sister was violated, they came up with a plan, and the whole city was killed, because it says in all the Meforshim that they were involved in the kidnapping, that Shechem and his father stationed the men of the city to make sure that no one would come from Yaakov Avinu's family to grab her out. Shechem wanted her badly. So they became partners in crime by protecting the city that no one could come in. So they were part of the kidnapping, and they were Chayav Misa. And that's how they had the right, Shimon and Levi. Now, Shimon and Levi were only bar mitzvah. One was 13 and 1 month, and one was 13 and 10 or 11 months. So they were both bar mitzvah boys, and they were incensed at what happened here, and they said, we're not taking this sitting down. And when Hamor came to ask Yaakov Avinu to let his son marry Dinah and stay with her, so the two sons answered and said, we can't give our sister to someone who is not circumcised. And they agreed to circumcise every male in the city. And on the third day, when they were all so sick from the circumcision, they went in and they killed everyone and grabbed their sister and went back home. Now, the pasuk says, Vayikach Vayikchu Shnei Bnei Yaakov, Shimon v'Levi. And the Netziv asks the question, if you said Shnei Bnei Yaakov, two sons of Yaakov, why do you have to say the name Shimon and Levi? Or just say, Vayikchu Shimon v'Levi, they identify who they were, but what do you have to say, Shnei B'nei Yaakov? So the Netziv answers and says, and Yaakov Avinu was so angry at what they did, he ended up dividing on his deathbed, dividing up Eretz Yisrael, and he left out Shimon and Levi. Shimon had to take, Yehuda had a big chunk in Eretz Yisrael, and he gave a little piece at the edge of all of his land to Shimon. And Levi had the Arei Leviim, that means they had their 42 cities that they were destined for, but they didn't get a chunk of land. And Yaakov Avinu said, Achal kem b'Yaakov, I am dispersing them amongst Klal Yisrael, that they're not going to have their own corner of land for themselves, because Achartem Osi, you embarrassed me in front of the world by devising such a trick to get them so sick and then kill them. So the Netziv says a very magnificent insight. You see, it looks like Shimon and Levi were partners in crime. They went out to kill the city. But we find later on that they parted ways, because when the story with Cosby Bas Tzur and Pinchas got up to kill the two of them because they did an Aveira in front of full view of Klal Yisrael, and they were immoral together, and publicly, no shame, no apology, nothing, that Shimon was very upset with Pinchas, who was from Shevet Levi. So we find that Shimon, says the Netziv, his concern why he went out and killed Shechem and Hamor and their whole town was because he was taking on for the kavod of the mishpacha. That means what? Like the pasuk says, "V'chein lo yeyasa," that to go violate a child of Yaakov Avinu, this was the most prestigious, distinguished, esteemed family in the whole world. And to go violate a daughter, the one sister, he went out, Shimon, for that, to defend the kavod of the mishpacha. But Levi didn't go out because of the mishpacha. He went out because of Kedushas Yisrael, because the holiness and the beauty of purity of Klal Yisrael was violated. So he ended up with the motivation of Kedushas Yisrael. And they each went out together and they killed out the city, but it was each for a different reason. One was kavod mishpacha, and one was Kedushas Yisrael. But when it came to what happened with this couple, he was from Shevet Shimon, and the Shevet stood up because of family pride and to defend the dignity of it. It said, what? Ben Puti Zeh, this kid whose grandfather served fattened calves to Avodah Zarah, he's going to get up and he is going to, because Yisro was the grandfather. One grandfather was Aaron HaKohen and one grandfather was Yisro. And he at one point was an Oved Avodah Zarah. So this kid who comes out of he's a grandson of an Oved Avodah Zarah is going to go and kill a Nasi b'Yisrael? How dare him? And they defended Shevet Shimon. The whole Shevet defended him. But Pinchas, who was from Levi and worried about Kedushas Yisrael, he went and killed them. And the Medrash says that the spear that he threw elongated hundreds of feet, that the top of the spear went specifically into them, that both were killed right on the spot. There was like a big mess of what happened over here. But it was different motivation, Kedushas Yisrael or kavod mishpacha. And that's why such a big deal of both Shimon and Levi as youngsters, as bar mitzvah boys, went and successfully killed out but each one from a different motivation. Now, the pasuk says that when Yaakov got done with Esav, he traveled back to Eretz Yisrael, but he first moved for 18 months to the city that he called Sukkos. Sukkos. And why did he name it Sukkos? Because the Torah says that the Chag, the Yom Tov of Pesach, corresponds to Avram Avinu, because there's a pasuk, Lushi va'asi, who goes that it was Pesach and she made matzahs. So we see a remez, a connection to Pesach with Avram Avinu. Yitzchak is connected Shavuos because the shofar that was sounded at Har Sinai by Matan Torah was the shofar of the aisle by the Akedah. So there's a connection to Shavuos, Har Sinai, and Yitzchak. But the Yom Tov of Sukkot is connected to Yaakov Avinu because it says that Yaakov Avinu, when he got to Sukkot, he built a house, and then he built tents, corrals for all of the animals. And because he made Sukkos, which is corrals, he called the city Corral. He called it Sukkos. Now, first, the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says it looks like he built himself a house, that he was worried about his comfort, he was worried about. Absolutely not. He built a Beis HaMedrash because he knew no Yid moves into a town or a village or a hamlet without first securing and making sure he lives by or he builds a shul and a Beis HaMedrash. And then he did for the animals. Why is that such a big deal that he went and he called an entire city Sukkos? And he got connected to Sukkos. I mean, we know that his Shorish Neshama is connected because his yortzeit, the yortzeit of Yaakov Avinu, is the first day of Sukkos. That is his yortzeit. So the Mefarshim explain, because the message of Yaakov Avinu is how to survive the Golos. He is Keneged Myriad, which is the darkness. Myriad we daven at night. We don't daven Myriad by day. Shachris is Avram Avinu, who was always so positive because of his chesed, to smile and to do good for other Yidden, to other people. He's Shachrit, which is the bright, shining sun. And Yitzchak, which is Din, he's Gevura, because in Mincha, as the Gemara says, that a person should be very careful how he davens Mincha. Now, what's the difference? Mincha is Ashrei, Shemana Esrei, and Aleinu. So we daven that by Shachris, and we daven it again by Mincha. So why does the Gemara say be careful by Mincha? Because Mincha is when much is decided in heaven on the person. And it's a din. It's a time of severity and gevura. So you have to be extra careful in how you daven mincha. So explain the Mekubolim about mincha. And to survive Golus, in the darkness of Golus, we have to know how to handle Gashmias. That people could take the Gashmias. It says that Yaakov Avinu, when he was there in Sukkot, he established a coin, currency. And he established Shavokim according to a different Mandiyamar in the Gemara, which means marketplaces for businesses. And according to a third opinion, it was merchotsos, that it was spas, bathhouses. Why? When he got to Sukkot, that's what he was concerned with, about money and about businesses and about bathhouses, recreation. But the answer is he established them to teach everyone how to handle, in a world of golus and a world of gashmias, money which becomes an avodah zorah by so many people. And business could be something, the dimension is so strong to lure a person away from his ruchnias. And how to deal with it, Yaakov was concerned, and that's why he established it and taught the people. You go to daven and you learn, and then you do your business, because parnos is important, but it's not a preface to davening. Davening is the preface, and then the business. And merchot represents all sorts of pleasures and relaxation. And yeah, a person has to relax and catch his breath. But that does not mean that it supersedes everything else which should be first on his list. And that's why he established that, the Mefarshim say, when he got to Sukkot. And it underscores the concept of what Yaakov Avinu wanted to accomplish in setting the pace into the DNA of every Yid Ladoros through the darkness of the Golus until Mashiach, until the Geula Shlema.